Here with Austin and Jose. Nice light topic today. Ritual, satanic, child abuse worldwide. This is what we're saying is gonna sound crazy. I recommend everyone look up and fact check some of the stuff we're talking about, because you're like, no way if you don't actually look. So I stumbled across some of this stuff. I thought it was pure insanity. Then I actually did a little bit of researching and was just completely blown away. So it's a hard place where to start because it's really complex. I think maybe Austin will have you start off with the finders. Might be a good place to jump in.
Good, yeah,
a brief overview of.
Yeah, I really think the best way to kind of at least present the conceptual outline of what we're about to. Honestly, we are about to descend into, let's say, the darkest clandestine corners of intelligence. We're going to catch a glimpse of the occult underground and seemingly. Which very much seems to be far more well established than I ever expected or anticipated.
We're peeking beyond the veil.
Yeah. People really should fact check and look up the stuff we're talking about in this episode.
It'll drive it home. Yeah.
And to understand, that also it's going to be very important for us to kind of present the reality of the fact that you have honest investigators who truly seem to have some sort of integrity and refuse to cease their investigation as their honest objective.
A lot
pursuit.
of them have died, but we'll get into that later.
Exactly, brother.
Mysterious circumstances.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of crazy because whenever Jose and I did our series on the Finders, I kind of began by introducing it in the terms of Congressman Leo Ryan's aide, William Holsinger, because this was kind of my glimpse into covert operations and public transparency being a complete and total limited hangout. And effectively, the church committee hearings were just an entire ploy to deceive the public into believing that they could trust the state and that the intelligence apparatus actually had their best interest at heart. But in reality, man, I mean, that's just not the case. And once you witness the excruciating details of certain legal cases like what we're about to discuss with the Finders, Dutroux, McMartin, the Presidio, the West Point scandal. I mean, every single one of these overlap. The Franklin scandal.
I don't even know all of them, but I stumbled across Finders and Dutroux, and I was like, wow, when I stumbled across those two.
And you'll be astounded. They not only tie into that, they tie into other less child trafficking network type things like false flag attacks, like what I would maybe at some point will tie into what we got into just recently. Obviously, this would be a month ago and this goes out to public, but local city bombing. I believe this is tied into something that it's called Operation Gladio. I'd say colloquially speaking, there's Operation Gladio, and then there's real Operation Gladio, which is what actually specifically happened in Italy. But in the same way that we use MK Ultra to mean colloquially speaking, just kind of mind control Fed stuff. Gladio is kind of a substitute for this.
A lot of the same people network, are working, or MK Ultra. They're crossing over in these things.
Yes, it's true,
but these organizations are real. Yeah. Let's just real quick spend a couple minutes walking through a couple of these things, if people can get a couple of details, see how crazy this is. Finders is how insane this is. I think originally it was broken open because what was it? Some men were pulled over with 6 young. Abused children.
Yeah, it's basically 2 men with 6 young children who were looked first entirely unkempt. I mean, they were completely dirty. They had no conceptual. They couldn't even conceptualize what a toilet was. They were only fed based on a reward system. This is all
they looked like they were starving.
Exactly, and they were behaving like animals. That was what the original report was from the witness who discovered, saw them with these 2 well-dressed men who were in suits, right? And they were allegedly living out of a van, because they discovered a van with a mattress, and it seemed as if, again, you could really what inevitably resulted was apparently they were actually taking these children to a Jesuit school in Mexico, which was connected to the organization, but we'll get into that. But I think that honestly, when you realize that around the same time of the Finders, you had, this is so crazy to me, and it's what I first brought up to Jose whenever we started this, which was, you have the public awareness. This is when the Finders comes into public awareness. You have the arrest taking place in Tallahassee, Florida in '87. Now, consider the fact that this is peak satanic panic, right? This is very much, I think, a key component in understanding just the environment at the time, right? And then realizing that seemingly when you consider the Satanic Panic and being some sort of like justification and excuse, right, for what was seemingly very many different occult organizations propping up all around the same time with these extreme scandals surrounding them regarding child sexual abuse and abductions and ritual murder as well.
Stories are almost always identical too when you hear kids speak across these cases we'll get into.
100%.
But yeah, no, the finders, like I said, after the rest, didn't they go and like raid some of their offices and stuff, trace it back?
U.S. Customs, yeah.
Yeah, and some of the stuff they found, well, some of them I think were already emptied out like really quick, so they had some kind of warning.
Oh man, they had prior knowledge.
Yeah, some prior knowledge, but they still found crazy stuff like
jars of piss and shit, right?
Tons of pictures with kids doing satanic rituals, killing goats.
The ritual murder of Henrietta and Igor, the goats that they called that. You know what their justification was? The organization itself was that this was animal husbandry that they were training the kids in, and in reality,
agriculture class.
They're all dressed in
goats and satanic rituals.
Right, and they're all dressed in robes.
Were these photos ever released? Probably not, huh? Because I heard there was lots of different kids, right? They weren't just the kids that were accounted for there. There was tons of different kids that were like brutalizing animals, satanic rituals, robes.
And also the altar itself and the area that had the jars of piss and shit and had the altar in the center, and it very much seemed as if they were utilizing this as a film studio. And the implication was being that this was child pornography or snuff films potentially even as well, which is another reality.
A lot of these seem to track into that, which we'll get into. The next one we're getting to. There's direct proof of that in the next one.
Exactly.
But they had tons of, I don't know how many people were in the finders, but they had all kinds of records of like tracking kids, applying for like babysitting jobs. They were watching children all over.
Yep.
Infiltrating. It's a Palestine file.
There was a file that was discovered when U.S. Customs agent Ramon J. Martinez and the original investigators raided the warehouse. They legitimately found these files, one being Pentagon break-in, the other was a file on Palestinian children, the other was directions and instructions on how do you infiltrate babysitting services, all these various child care organizations, and this would, you know what else they were doing? They were running intelligence on local families who were utilizing the babysitting services or the child care organizations, and they would then send members of the finders to go and surveil them, and they would actually follow them around and get their daily activities in order to where they understood when and where they might be able to abduct the children. This is a reality.
Yeah, you don't believe it's real. This is going to get a lot darker and a lot crazier real quick. This is a start. Hey guys, Jake Shields here. If you want to support Fight Back Podcast, our brand new sponsor is Think Zinc. They're a company that supports free speech and they're opposed to genocide. This is a 7-1 formula with all the highest grade vitamins and minerals. It has magnesium, zinc, vitamin E, vitamin C, and housed in MCT oils. This is great for elite athletes and the common person. Hey guys, Jake Shields here. As you know, a lot of my guests are extremely controversial. So if you want to support free speech and my podcast, go to fightbackpodcast.com. Just the beginning, like how crazy this story gets, because they had records all around the world too. One of the main people was directly tied to the CIA, correct?
Oh yeah, Marion David Petty.
And she had like traveled all kinds of places you weren't.
His wife was CIA.
Yeah, his wife was in the CIA. But my God, it gets so crazy when you get into Marion David Petty because he himself has like an extreme intelligence background. He was actually a part of a driver service. Who was actually he was the driver for you had J. Edgar Hoover was one of them. Wow. Right? Yeah, and by the way,
they're all tied in. These, like I said, these are very high. The people that are running this cult that was kidnapping kids and doing satanic rituals. There's no direct proof they're killing them. This one, but
the driving thing's huge because when you read a book, I would highly recommend.
Edgar Hoover, you said, right? He was the most powerful.
Yeah,
FBI guy for like 30 years. How long was it? Like forever, basically.
Yeah, but I had the chicken hawk was what I was getting at, like drivers. Yep. There's a common through line in these is drivers.
Yep.
Drivers of these large organizations, which it makes sense if you think about powerful people. Who would need to be in the know? Probably security and transportation. There's no way you can avoid these people being in the know. So there is something interesting that finders call. It's almost as like, are we being hidden like in plain sight? Something crazy going on in some areas where there's. Who knows? There's cults, perhaps, taking over driving services for the high-powered individuals. So it's like, but who the hell ever thinks about driving companies?
How many members were supposed to be in the finders, or is not really?
I mean, It's hard to get an actual number that seems accurate and credible, but it's still like, obviously it was international in scope. They were actually procuring children using a private peer-to-peer computer network, which, by the way,
that was their job.
87.
Think of how advanced it is now.
87. Right, so like this is not a normal thing, right? This is not like status quo. There's no real like
computers were hardly
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean
so
that was back
advanced in the top technology.
Very advanced at the time.
Yeah, I had Ryan Mott on recently, and he was talking about this trafficking across the world. I was talking on the phone. He said there's like 350,000 missing kids that come to America. I'm like, I thought he was like, this guy's a quack. I'm like, send me his information. I can't have like some crazy guy on my show. And then he sent me straight from the State Department.
Oh yeah,
and he just he broke it down.
It's real, man.
It's real. And let's hop around real quick, then we'll come back. But this was actually, I believe it was kind of basically, the investigation was basically shut down by the CIA. And they basically said, hey, we're taking over, stop investigating it. We'll go back to this. I want to switch real quick to the Tro. Is that?
The Tro, yeah.
That one really opened my eyes. That was one that made me realize it was real, because this one's dark. This one's just dark and bad. I spent the night like investigating it. It was just disturbing.
It's the one that sticks with me more than any other.
It's the one that made me realize it's actually happening though. Provable. I don't even know where to start with this.
Jake, just seeing your emotional reaction here, it's
like I have children and shit. Seeing this shit is
it's how I react. As far as I don't have children, and that's another reason why it was just like I discovering these this actual reality that we're facing here, and the true threat that is being posed. I mean, by this underground, the most sadistic.
It's the most evil shit I've ever seen in the Tro. And this is 100% proven. Court convictions. They were kidnapping, raping, torturing, and abusing children.
And Dutroux had been convicted for this before, so it wasn't even the first time. So it's like there's far more credence. So you can be like, oh, you're just crazy conspiracy theorists. It's like, no. For one, he also did get busted in the end. The real story here is actually the idea that their larger network seemed to there was another individual named Michel Nihoul who clearly was more of the nexus to the larger movement, and he kind of just got a slap on the wrist for something like drugs, which ironically is kind of tie into a larger he was using drugs as a payment method for these people.
Basically seemed like he was some kind of low-end guy. And he even said he worked for him.
He was a handyman.
He had 10 homes. He was on welfare. He had 10 homes. There was dungeons in all of them. They had all these kids. I mean, I think he's convicted of killing 4, but there's almost certainly a lot more.
He was mostly just a jobber for sickos. That's about it.
They knew he molested tons of them. And he even said that. And all the kids that survived all said it was elites. They were all coming in. Yeah. All these high-level elites, the most high-level people in Belgium. There was dozens of hairs, or maybe even hundreds of hairs. They wouldn't test them. I forget what it was. Didn't they change the judge or something, I believe?
Oh, yeah. Judge Connerat was the original presiding judge, and guess what? They utilized... Essentially, they exploited the fact that he had gone to a dinner that was in honor of the victims' families. And they said that was...
You can't honor the family of the
children he killed? They said that was a conflict of interest. Although... they didn't even discuss the conflict of interest in the replacement judge, which directly, so
they had DNA of dozens, if not hundreds of people. Yeah, man. The kids were saying it was the most elite people of Belgium, and they refused to test it. This was a massive case in Belgium.
The hair thing was in the prison in which the girls, I forget which ones, you'll probably remember specifically, but there were some girls, there was a period of time that they were trapped in there, supposedly being seen by no one because Dutroux was gone and left him there, and they starved to death, or supposedly. Obviously, there's a lot more of that, as you alluded to, with the insane amount of hair samples they found there from other people other than Dutroux, obviously implying other people have been visiting this area while Dutroux was in prison. So there clearly are other people involved.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's, that honestly at this point it goes very much without saying, because... which, by the way, you mentioned Michel Nihoul, and the first thing he does because... Oh, and by the way... Michel Lelievre, who apparently was a drug addict and an accomplice of Dutroux, right?
Yeah, he had a big accomplice. I think he had tons of them, but there were several convicted.
And they were drivers for Nihoul, weren't they?
What kind of people are going to kidnap and torture kids together? Just the most sick, evil.
Yeah, truly.
It's hard to imagine this evil. These are 100% proven, and all the witnesses said there was tons of people coming and doing it, and they named the highest people of Belgium.
And
up
by
into
the way,
the king.
They mentioned King Albert.
Yeah, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, absolutely. He was definitely, Michel Nihoul himself said that he would never be taken down because he had dirt on the highest.
Yeah, he literally then tried to sell it to the journalist.
They think they were filming people doing this, and we don't want to get to stuff they're doing, but they weren't just raping; they were torturing, and the most brutal, evil stuff you can imagine, keeping these kids locked up in these dungeons.
Sickest you can think of, probably worse than that.
Exactly. Yeah, he had they said 10 homes with, I don't know how many of them had dungeons, but I know most of them had dungeons built under there with kids. And there was one case that really pissed me off of the neighbors called for screaming kids. And I don't know the details behind it, but
was that Finders?
The head police guys, this was Detroit. The cop came over, they could hear the screaming.
That's right, multiple times.
I think basically the cop, he heard the screaming, and he couldn't hear anything. The guy's like, I can hear him screaming. And the guy yells, shut up, yelling, so the kids would be scared because they're being abused. And the kids showed up, and then he's like, oh, there's no kids.
Yeah.
This guy got a promotion.
Yeah, he yelled silence. I remember that was the thing. He yelled silence. And it was like, but then the way he interpreted that later was, oh, I was just telling him to be quiet.
Oh,
so
this guy had also already been convicted of kidnapping and raping and abusing kids multiple kids before this case happened. And they just left kids in there.
Yeah, 100%.
And this cop got promoted, not jailed.
Exactly. And that is legitimately the point that, really needs to be made, honestly, is just the fact that Michel Nihoul himself, this is so crazy because, again, keep in mind,
he was the accomplice, this guy, right?
I think that, honestly, he was much more of
higher up.
Yeah, he called himself the monster of Belgium.
Yeah, Latrobe, I think, was just kind of a pawn.
He was apparently abducting children, and then I think that he also had a role to play because mind control manuals were discovered on his property. And it seemed as if, and here's the other crazy part of this case, is that whenever the girls were originally rescued, right, by the authorities who finally actually came and did some sort of attempt at doing their job in a way. Yeah, well, these two victims, they run to Marc Dutroux, and they try as if. Right,
he was the one to protect him.
Yes,
because the other guy was more evil, so he was less evil probably.
There's a claim that he himself was actually protecting, at least two of the girls from the wider snuff network that was playing out because apparently
he didn't want. He's still an evil man. I'm not gonna accuse him.
It's a twisted thing to wrap your head around. I think there's generational components to this, and while this really gets deep into MK Ultra, but like when it comes to. I mean, I don't know for certain that Dutroux it fits this bill, but I think it is important for people to understand when you think of these type of networks, especially when you reference Eye of the Chicken Hawk. How this usually works with these sorts of networks is people get abused, people age, they get older. At some point, you're no longer what they want for that. Yeah. You now fill a different role, or you get removed. And so the idea is, what kind of role does that? What role do you fill as a child sex slave as you move up in this? You're going to likely fill a Dutroux type of role. And so now you think, if you take into the MK Ultra aspect, like one of the people in the X dossier made claims that their pimp. Literally was essentially once they started experiencing like separate psyches, split alters, that he started encouraging that, and if anything, it was almost as if he almost might have had some as well. And so they almost had like they had multiple almost relationships going on. Some that were like one of her alters would be like more of like a sexual relationship. So this was like I believe they even referred to it as the whore. And then there was other stuff where it was like she was more of a father-daughter, which is like. As sick as this to wrap your head around, if you are someone like Dutroux, it's almost like, how do you even perpetrate this? Yeah. Like, how do you even be the person to do this? So it's like, you almost have to, even to be the one doing that, create a schism within your own mind. And so it is like, it kind of, as warped as it may be, I could honestly kind of understand the concept of how Dutroux and this child would have a warped trauma bonding sort of, tie.
Himself, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a year ago or so, I saw some guy speaking. I thought it was totally crazy at the time. It sounded pretty credible. He talked about how he's part of these childhood sexual cults, and then they always want kids hurting each other. They all have the same theme across all these. And then eventually somehow he got out because he didn't want to do it because they were trying to make him start being one of the person that becomes one of the head guys.
Is it Benassi maybe? Is that the guy?
Unfortunately, I don't know his name. It was always a clip. I saw Ian Carroll or something posted.
It might be.
Watching that, I was like...
Paul Benassi himself was a part of the Franklin scandal. He was a victim, right? And basically he had exposed the fact that he essentially became... Not only was he claims that he was a part of procuring other children.
Yeah, because they bring kids and abuse them.
Exactly.
Why don't you walk through the Franklin scandal real quick? A lot of people watching might have no idea what it is.
The Franklin scandal.
Then we can kind of tie all these all together. Just a quick summary.
Big shout out to Nick Bryant. Yeah.
Yeah, at first I thought it had to be fake, but then once I saw the Latroux and the similarities and the finders, the CIA running it, it's like you start realizing there's something here. And I'm still trying to figure out what. Buddy. I don't want to make allegations that aren't real, but there's something really dark and evil going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt about it, man. And, it reminds me of, like I mentioned Laura Silsby, but also Dennis Hastert, right, the longest tenured Speaker of the House, who was legitimately a pedophile. and
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura Silsby, of course, gets caught, procuring children and trafficking them across the Haitian border. And then Bill Clinton himself goes and basically flies to Haiti, gets her out of prison, and then sends her back to then become a key member as an authoritative figure at the Amber Alert system and the domestic U.S.
So she's involved with that.
Yeah,
and then
man.
Clinton tied in with Epstein.
Haiti, that one. I forget the character in Haiti, the one who sang.
Laura Silsby.
I mean, and we don't know exactly what Epstein was doing with his blackmail. There's no direct, connection to these young children, but they could be there.
Yeah.
He had the temple on his island. He had the one guy in the interview I was talking about. Actually, he said Epstein was part of these things.
Yep.
And there's some weirdness too in this current day. I'm not making any allegations. I haven't looked into this enough. I would recommend maybe people like Whitney Webb or Johnny Vednor, people who have looked into this if you want to get deeper. But there is something too, like some of the characters who have come out and spoke about Epstein as the concept of us just applying to or explaining the idea of like how this is generational and what do you do with someone who starts from lower and then comes up. I mean, in what they were doing in the Epstein network, they were getting these girls to procure other girls. So it is like you take victims and you make them into accomplices. And so it is this kind of, you're creating this moral graying of the lines, essentially.
Man.
Yeah, they target like kids that are in what do they call foster homes a lot and stuff too. At least in America, it seems like the Franklin scandal. That's one where they're targeting
no real
foster
parental
homes.
guardian who would legitimately like follow up on your well-being.
And they can say, "Oh, the kid's lying or sexually abused or lying."
Which, by the way, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was basically ran parallel with MK Ultra.
There's a bunch of MK Ultra spooks on the board. That's it.
And they would
connections.
infiltrate these legal cases that would be exposing the reality of this very well established sadistic child sexual abuse network and
there's a bunch of MK Ultra spooks rolling in and go, false memory.
They all
false memory. Here's
who was on the board of advisors, or not board of advisors. The I forget what it's called, but he was legitimately on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
Who's that?
Louis Jolyon West.
Oh.
What are we doing?
We just talked about him last episode.
Last podcast we were talking about him. He was one of the head guys, probably number 2 guy in MK Ultra, which was doing mind control, just doing evil experiments.
Number 2,
torture.
Gottlieb,
like Jack Ruby, Charles Manson, just for swapping memories out. So he's.
And so they were infiltrating these legal cases, these defense teams, these prosecution, like federal judges, staffs. They were that was basically the sensitive informant program.
Yeah, that was revealed by Jesse Trinity. He actually revealed that information. They were infiltrating courts.
There's so many of these characters that connect and the intelligence connections. And
you'll lose your mind. It's all connected.
Through this, you're going to start. Okay, so the Franklin cover-up, real quick. I don't know details behind that. It was
Larry King, right? He sang the
not the talk show host. Yeah, I made that mistake
he's a black
for years.
Guy. And he sang the national anthem at the Republican National Convention.
He was like what, the number 4 in line the president was, or something like that. I forget. He was a speaker, wasn't he?
No, that was Dennis Hastert.
Oh, it's Hastert. Okay, that's right. He was still pretty high up. He was very high up in the GOP. Yeah,
and he. In 1984, he was the one who sang the anthem at the Republican National Convention, which is just insane in Dallas, by the way, which is hilarious. But so he's a GOP high roller. We're the fastest rising African American star, and this is what's crazy because it was on November 4th, 1988. That's when the Franklin Credit Union was raided by the federal authorities
for embezzling money or something. Correct. That's where it started. Yeah.
Yes, man. And they had allegedly. Apparently, it was ultimately $39.4 million had been legitimately embezzled. Yeah.
It's just accounting error.
That's just the beginning of the investigation.
Yeah, exactly. But once you realize that there's far more, he was indicted on 40 counts, which included conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and essentially Clarence Thomas, who was Supreme Court Justice. He was then the chairman of the Equal Opportunity Commission, and he described King as a friendly person and said his legal travails were unfortunate. But Larry King had been dogged by accusations of pedophilia for a number of years.
And he'd been accused of that before all
this.
Oh, yeah,
happened. Absolutely. And by the way, to this day, Nick Bryant is still like following up with him everywhere he's going. He's still trying to infiltrate child care organizations.
He still is, yeah.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Nick Bryant, the author of the Franklin scandal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I should try to get that guy.
He just did a stream with Ian Carroll and Ryan Dawson.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I know
Nick
both
Bryant
those guys,
actually,
so I'll get his...
Yeah, you should.
No, because it's such important work, the whole Franklin.
Absolutely.
Brother.
He's amazing. He's great.
Yeah, because these kids all of a sudden, tied into that, all of a sudden, all these kids saying they were not just molested, they're brought into these satanic rituals with powerful people. They want them to hurt other children. It's always the exact same story. It just sounds so ridiculous it can't be true.
Mm-hmm. That's what Paul Bonacci said. He said that Larry King had essentially procured him as a victim, right, and then trained him in these hypno-programming techniques where essentially this goes all the way back to Lee Harvey Oswald and the Civil Air Patrol with David Ferrie, who's hypno-programming the Civil Air Patrol young boys who are right, and he's raping them after he puts them in this hypnotic trance. And so he was running MK Ultra through Tulane University at the time, and that he was running the Civil Air Patrol. And this is all, David Ferrie super tied in the JFK assassination. I mean, it's crazy what he was doing because
Barry Seal. I don't know if maybe it's Barry Seal and Oswald were both in the Civil Air Patrol.
Both in the Civil Air Patrol.
Yeah, so clearly there's a lot of overlap between all these organizations.
100%.
That's because it sounds too crazy when you start seeing the overlap. And then also, last night I was doing a little more research. I'm terrible with names, but there was a guy. I don't know if he was giving money or taking money from. I think it was the king. He was involved with this Franklin thing. And he also had ties to Iran-Contra. He was the creator of the Church of Set, which basically is satanic.
Michael Aquino, man. Oh, my God.
He's very much part of the Franklin scant cover-up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right to NATO, too.
And Michael Aquino himself, man. By the way, military police investigator Ed Albanoski. This is very important because he's then the chief of juvenile investigations at the Presidio, right? The Presidio in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
The military base.
This guy was?
This guy was.
Michael,
not Michael Aquino, no. But this Ed Albanoski was. Okay. But this was when Michael Aquino was stationed at the Presidio.
So is he from San Francisco too?
He
seems very, very connected in all these.
Because it wasn't just basically there was an Air Force base near near Omaha as well in Nebraska. And essentially, that's what they said. Michael Aquino and Larry King were coming in.
He was originally part of the Church of Satan, I believe. They needed his own thing. The Church
he was
of
with
Set.
Anton LaVey in the Church of Satan, and then they had some sort of philosophical dispute.
Yeah.
How they wanted to kill their children.
Yeah. Right. When in reality, I think it's very easy to point to the fact that, as I had mentioned before at the very beginning, honestly, because this I do think is very important to actually point out, is the fact that you have. What I think is the most important thing, Leo Ryan's aide, William Holsinger, remember the first thing that I brought up? This points out what I think is happening with these cult organizations like the Finders, like Mark Dutroux with the what was it? The Abrasax, right? The chicken snake
cult,
god, right? Yeah, which you're like, what is happening? There's actually a satanic cult organization, the local chapter of
And I find it particularly interesting that it also was called, I forget what was it called. It had two names. It was called the Abrasax cult, but it was also called the Divine Church of something, but it very much a Christian, type of, and their targets were immigrants from Africa, and so in that area in Belgium there were a lot of immigrants in that area, and so they were known for having actually a program to essentially help these people get on their feet.
Wow.
But they were also known for having a prostitution problem with those people too. So it is you have now the person running the cult of Abraxas or running the finances for the cult of Abraxas was Michelle Nihul's wife.
Yeah.
And at the time. And so you have the wife of the person running the largest probably child trafficking network probably in the world, really, maybe.
Where they find skulls, jars of blood.
Yeah. And she's running this cult that's targeting young African women.
The Mark Dutroux. So this was basically Mark Dutroux had another accomplice, right? And he was essentially exposed as writing letters. There were letters that were going between he and the priestess, right? The high priestess of the order of the local Abraxas.
That's right.
Order.
Yeah, this is the Belgium one. Yeah, because he was involved with this satanic
special
cult.
Gifts were what he was procuring for this
Let's
high
go back
priestess.
To this real quick, how high level this was. Like I said, the judges were moved.
Yeah.
I believe I read 20 people mysteriously died, investigators and
Oh,
witnesses.
it's the Saints more than that, I think.
Yeah, it was at least 20.
At least.
Were basically most likely killed.
Mm-hmm.
Which shows the power of these people. They were moving. It wasn't just moving the judges. There was tons of things. I can't remember the details. I remember reading just being what? The police. I think at one point some of the police were actually arrested.
Yeah,
because they were involved with the cover-up.
Oh man, yeah. Apparently, police were actually assisting in the procurement of these children, and that was another very much allegations that were coming forward as far as the witnesses involved with a lot of this, and then also members of the organization and the network were coming forward and actually, making these statements, right? That they were blowing the whistle, right, and saying that. And Dutroux himself,
some of them probably felt terrible about it. They were like just minorly involved and were disgusted with themselves and wanted to come forward.
Dutroux himself mentioned the fact that he was given assistance by the local police in procuring Effie Alambrix and Melissa Russo. Yeah,
you're helping kidnap the.
Yeah, these people.
The cop was clearly in on it. He yelled at the kid to be silent and left him. Kid screaming in a dungeon.
Now
Hey guys, Jake Shields here. As you know, I have a free speech podcast. To keep that going, it's important to have sponsors and support them. If you want to support them and me, go to antelopehillpublishing.com and be sure to use the promo code FIGHTBACK. They have tons of different books that are hard to get. Today I recommend Opiate of the Masses. It's a full journalistic investigation into the opiate crisis in America. So again, to support the podcast, antelopehillpublishing.com and the promo code FIGHTBACK.
I don't know how we can't talk about Gladio here because of these same group. It's called the Gendarmerie in Belgium here. Now, I guess they have they have a different setup. I guess they have private police and military police in Belgium. Is something along. I don't really in Belgium, so maybe some Belgian person can explain it to me a little bit better. But from my understanding, they have two sets of police. You have the military police, and so we're specifically talking about Gendarmerie, which are the military police. These people were also implicated in what was called the Brabant killings, which were almost certainly a part of Operation Gladio. And if you know what Operation Gladio was, and when I say part of Operation Gladio, I mean literally. As I said, I think maybe in the previous episode, it's almost like a colloquialism, much like MK Ultra. What that means is essentially, I'm sure you've heard of Operation Northwoods.
Yeah.
So it's essentially that, but done. A lot of people don't realize that it's actually
real quick for people that don't know, I'll explain it real quick.
Well, Northwoods, most people would know that. It's probably the best place to start. Northwoods was a thing written up, but with the Joint Chiefs of Staff under JFK. Particularly Lemnitzer was the one who pushed it. I think he was the primary guy, the primary pusher. Now JFK became hip to it. It was like, whoa, what the hell is this? Threw it. It was like, we're not doing that kind of deal. Apparently got really upset about it. Now what happens after that? The Joint Chief of Staff, the Lemnitzer guy, he then goes over to NATO, and then shortly after that, what happens over there? Operation Gladio. Operation Gladio is essentially Operation Northwoods carried out. But now, once again, I didn't really explain it. Operation Northwoods was during the Cuban crisis. Essentially, the idea was they were going to have bombing, shootings, killings, all different false flag attacks
right? I think we're going to bomb
of Americans.
People,
That way they can gin up, American hostilities against the Cubans. So that way they can justify further actions. So obviously just your generic false flag. Now we had, as I said, the guy who was the architect of that, Lemnitzer, essentially then gets basically fired, goes from the United States, goes and works over at NATO, and then that now has a place there. And then around that time is when Operation Gladio happens, was essentially Operation Northwoods carried out, but with a different target being the communists. The issue, the major thing that most people know of is the Days of Lead over in Italy, where the idea was that they essentially created like false flag attacks and other similar such things to create hostilities against the Communist Party that was rising into semi-political party or political prominence at that time.
Strategy of tension.
Yes, strategy of tension.
Exactly.
And which is what is kind of the basic, theory behind false flags. So this is where I've mentioned multiple times how it's like this is kind of tied into this whole thing. You can't really separate these things. Like if you understand that there is a network out there that carries out, awful, false flag attacks, like theoretically things like Oklahoma City and 9/11, maybe not exactly, but things of these sorts that create justifications for awful things to do. They're out here doing it. Now, it's inextricable that you then have like things like drug trafficking or things to create funds. Like people understand that, but now
because they need to bring the money. Gary Webb shot himself twice in the head right when he was exposing them.
Yeah. But what's more valuable than illegal drugs? What could be even more valuable and also maybe have dual purposes?
Human compromise and child trafficking.
Because they completely. 100%. I mean, if they have you having sex or killing a kid, they completely own you.
Guess who's with the narrative now?
You'll be like you'll be tweeting like Lindsey Graham.
Brother, it's the enterprise. This is where the intersection. We find ourselves at the crossroads where we witness the intersection between the occult, right, the well-established intelligence apparatus, and honestly the occult underground, but also the combination of essentially what becomes the very well-established pedophile underground as well, right? And they seemingly, as you had mentioned, by the way, could potentially be using, these various occult ideologies that, combine Satanism and satanic ritual abuse, right, as some sort of cover
Well,
right?
yeah, because I was researching with Grok last night, and I was asking its theories, and it says it's very possible. I'm not saying this is correct. It's very possible it's using the Satanism because it sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah.
People will see it
You hide
and they'll be
absurdity.
like, "Oh, it's not happening," or they could really believe in this stuff
Exactly.
too, though,
Yeah.
because it's like maybe they do believe in these
Yeah.
demonic
Oh, yeah.
gods. I'm
And
not,
which I do think.
but
that
I never
there's
really
a-
thought the theory they could just be throwing that in there to be
Right.
oh,
And
Satanism, that's like crazy.
And as we said in between these episodes, there's almost like a chicken and egg effect here. As I just kind of laid out here, the idea of like, oh, you can kind of find a way to understand this if you maybe are more want to be more grounded in reality or something. The idea of like, oh, this is to create, off the books funds, also be able to shore up narratives, to be able to create prevent this actor from doing this thing. This is your kind of way to, but it's also, as I said, chicken egg. It's like, or is it the inverse? Is all of this to facilitate the act?
the occult.
Like the
Yeah,
occult.
and I'm undecided. I'm undecided.
I am
It's,
too, man.
but either way, there's something bad going on. Like
100%.
guys like Gary Webb was investigating the CIA trafficking drugs to fund things. A lot of it into the black communities. And
Which,
stuff.
by the way, that was this is a recycled playbook. This tactic of kind of funding black bag operations, covert clandestine operations through this drug nexus or child trafficking nexus, which again, it's the enterprise is what's being represented. Yeah, and that falls perfectly in line with, let's say, the Son of Sam case with David Berkowitz, or the Fort Bragg murders, right, with Dr. Jeffrey McDonald, which essentially they both provide this perfect example of how, unfortunately, there are occult organizations like the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which directly tie in these groups and organizations, and also provide us with this recycled and a repeated strategy of essentially they were this. People talk about Iran-Contra all the time, right? But nobody's really discussing the Cadaver connection, and like okay, so. Frank, so it's very interesting because the Cadaver connection basically during the Vietnam War was set up through Fort Bragg, utilizing MPs, military police, but also utilizing the local narcotics division of the Fayetteville, North Carolina Police Department at Fort Bragg, for example. There were multiple military, it was far more than just Fort Bragg, obviously. And it was all up and down the East and West Coast even. And it was being very well distributed throughout the domestic United States. And so they were exploiting the Golden Triangle from Vietnam, and also from I think
opium
it was
trafficking.
Yes,
part of the Afghans. Now I look at the Afghan war, and I bet part of it was opium.
recycled strategy.
Yeah, I don't have proof of that, but I look at that
Exactly.
being like, I bet that's part of the war.
Why else do we have U.S. troops standing there guarding poppy fields?
Yeah, I can't think of any other reason.
Yeah, and then the production of heroin or opiates,
And then the Sackler family all of a sudden has OxyContin, and now we have 100,000 ODs a year.
Exactly. Now we have this huge,
I'm sure we've all lost friends to,
brother. I mean, I myself had an issue with it for a time, and then just had to at least just. Obviously,
life's tough. People go through times, and it's it can be fucking hard to get off something when you do.
Very
But
much.
luckily, you're able to step back and be like,
Absolutely.
I gotta get my shit together because I've lost friends. I've had other friends have a problem and then got themselves
I've
together.
seen it,
and
man. I've seen people drown. They can't.
I know.
Yeah, and it's
so
one
that's
of the
why you have
most
to talk
tragic
to your
things.
friends and stuff. I had one friend who was struggling, but he would always come talk to me, and he never stole or anything. He never became a shitty person. Then he got clean. It's like if you start stealing and go down that there's no
It's
real
hard
coming
to
back. It's
come
hard
back,
coming
man.
back from that.
Yeah, it's
I have
really
friends that have
hard.
stole from me, and I would forgive them if they apologize. But generally, it's like it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah, it really is. But I really think the point being here is just like the reality of the fact that you witness. Not only were the local narcotics officers actually involved in facilitating the network, you had they were utilizing the local chapter of this occult organization called the Process Church in the Jeffrey McDonald case, which is a 50-year murder case from Fort Bragg.
McDonald?
It's called the
Okay.
Fort Bragg murders, is
Yeah, I
what
don't
it's
know anything
called.
about this case, but
It's very crazy, and it's my most recent. Sorry, my most recent solo episode, right, where I went like 4 hours
deep in it. Yeah.
talking about this. I had no, expectation of actually covering it for such an extended period of time, but it was like once I realized. By the way, Ted Gunderson again involved in this as well.
He's someone I stumbled across recently. He's an investigator, right? An FBI investigator.
He was he ran the LA FBI for a time as well, and so he was very much like, and a lot of people question his credibility due to the fact that he obviously is a Fed,
Which is fair.
but which I understand, but still, how else would you have a perfect understanding of how this might, be potentially operating?
He was basically saying, I don't work that well. Basically, he was saying there's these networks of satanic trafficking, right?
I'll tell you right now, man, it's so crazy what he says about the finders.
I looked him up. I was hoping he was still alive, and I saw some of his videos. I'm like, wow, this guy's like.
Ted, yeah.
He's also, I think he's the one that found the tunnels on a separate
That's
case.
Exactly. Yeah. So he presented that.
What's the case? The
McMartin.
The McMartin Preschool.
Yeah, people don't know. I don't know the details behind this one again, but there was alleged of hundreds of kids were molested there.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just
around
McMartin.
60, I think.
It was,
they all said they were brought to these like tunnels, but there's no tunnels.
Tunnel systems.
They explained what were in them, the satanic rituals, and these kids are crazy, manipulated. Years later, he dug up and found 45-foot long tunnels, giant. They didn't find them all even, but these massive tunnels had pentagrams drawn on them.
Oh, yeah.
Hundreds of bones of animals. This is like real shit.
So Ray Buckey, the key perpetrator in that case, right? The McMartin Preschool. It turns out you have Will Bynum, who's this investigator, right? And I think it was the Manhattan or Hermosa police department at the time, and he was effectively they murdered him and claimed it was a suicide because he was actually the day before he was going to testify and actually discuss the details of what he discovered at the McMartin site, which was dead rabbit carcasses at one of the filled in. So they had discovered that there was foreign soil that had filled in the tunnel system.
They wanted to hide it after it got raided. Yeah,
exactly. And so that alone revealed the fact that there was a tunnel system perfectly in place. Which, by the way, the individual who ordered basically, I forget the name of the individual just offhand that actually ordered the construction of the McMartin Preschool, but he had actually built that tunnel system and had it dug in before they ever actually created.
Like pre-planned.
Yes,
because it just sounds so crazy. The kids like, oh, we're getting brought through tunnels, sometimes flying places, doing satanic rituals. People are like, oh, that's just crazy.
Right.
Then they found the tunnels.
Yes, they did.
There was a lot. I don't know the number. There was a lot of kids saying it.
At the time, though, like as you mentioned, I believe there was some document that came out. You correct me if I'm wrong. That essentially implied, we didn't find, essentially didn't mention the tunnels. Yeah. And it wasn't until later that, much later, after it already got written off as satanic panic. A lot of people always like to point to how none of these, none of these, these did start to go to trial, and then they all just fell through one by one until there was no one applying. But you got to think the same thing, from a legal standpoint, if you're think about the chances of actually going through with prosecution with a child. Think about it, as twisted as it may be, from the ultimate perspective. If you were trying to tear down the credibility of a child, not too hard to do. But it's also the go ahead.
The False Memory Syndrome Foundation. They instantly infiltrated. So all these MK Ultra,
Jolly West probably involved in this.
Exactly. They infiltrate, the McMartin case. And they legitimately decide that they're going to undermine the credibility of the child victims. I think
it might have been hundreds even. It was so many.
Jordan Peterson had on Michael Aquino's wife at some point, didn't he?
Oh God, that's terrible.
Yeah, that's a fun one to go look back. He completely going with the satanic panic narrative in that little bit. I never watched entirely, but that's exactly what that is.
It's easy for it just to sound crazy. Yeah. It just sounds so insane when you hear this stuff. But then they find the tunnels. They have the, people constantly dying, and then all the stories are the same. Tons of these cases always mention tunnels. Almost every case, not on everything, but a lot of times the kids remember say, "Oh, we were brought through underground tunnels." That just sounds so insane. But then, here are some tunnels.
I think it was 60 children they said from McMartin. I think somewhere in the realm of that. It
was a lot. I know
and one of which I think claimed that a Mikey. Michael Aquino, and I believe they even described his inside.
Here we go.
He was the guy who was tied in with intelligence. The Church of Set, right?
Yeah,
he's tied in with all these cases. It seems like
this is the Presidio connection, right? Which ties in the West Point scandal. Which again, Michael Aquino, it shouldn't go without being said as far as. He has military intelligence connections, and there's very much an overlapping thread that you can tie in.
NATO connections, as we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And by the way, he's going to the Belgium castle where they're holding the pink ballets for Marc Dutroux, the victims of Marc Dutroux. Yeah, man.
He's right there.
Yep. And by the way,
two of the case where it's 100% proven that kids were tortured to death,
And two of the victims in the Marc Dutroux case went to an event the night of their abduction where they were hypnotized live in front of an entire crowd.
No way.
I swear. And as far as that's concerned, it to me it's proof positive that because that was the night they were abducted. Yes, man.
Yeah, so it's like they said stuff you don't want to believe, but when you start seeing just too many connections, it's
absurd. And beyond that, it becomes undeniable at a certain point, and that's where you find yourself in an extraordinary position where you have to kind of actually grapple with the fact that this is the power paradigm that we're witnessing play out in front of us.
It's true. You don't want to talk about it because it's so dark and you sound crazy, but then you start seeing all the points and you're like, something's clearly there.
I think True Detective probably does one of the greatest jobs. I bring this up frequently to like kind of highlight this.
Yeah.
Season 1, highlight this concept. It's like near the end, kind of the penultimate of all. He says at one point, he's like, essentially, I refuse to look away again. And this is as they're watching one of the child snuff films in this. And it's like, and he's like, did you watch this? And he's like, I won't look away again, because he had dropped the ball about this case years prior, and because due to his inattentiveness, and he recognized this, and he says, I will not look away again. So he watches the snuff film and said, I had to watch for details, and I watch this over and over again because I will not look away again. I will not let this be in my consciousness.
That's what I watch that.
And that was kind of the theme of that whole season, in my opinion, because then you have Marty, the other cop. His whole thing was he's inattentive, amazing, and he was a normal guy that didn't want to believe this is real, and he refused to see the signs that were there because he didn't want to see what was real. He refused to look. And I think that's important. I mean, we need to be evil in the face and shine a light on it.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Like I said, recommended several times before, is everyone should go do their own research. What we're saying, because you start digging, you start being like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're like, I'm gonna sound crazy. You're like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's be crazy together.
And there's so many cases that are connected, and you start seeing the same themes, the same thing done. The kids always the exact. That's what really got me when I realized the kids are all saying the exact same story. See, I saw that before I stepped across the door. I'm like, why are these kids always saying the exact same story? Are they abused? They make them abuse each other.
It's a psychologist, twisting them.
I think maybe because the kid's like purposely innocent, and they want to like take the innocence or abuse the innocence.
Absolutely,
it's like the ultimate evil.
Trauma-based mind control.
The ultimate evil. Yeah. The Process Church of the Final Judgment. That's a book by Maury Terry, The Ultimate Evil. It's an amazing book, and it exposes a lot of what you're talking about. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like once you kind of like realize the level of sadism that's involved with these groups, right? That is where you again.
Yeah, like it's bad. Like I don't even want to talk about it on the show. People want to dig.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into details.
Where's the places they can dig if they want to? Because I
so
don't want to.
There is something called the X dossier that I encourage everyone to go and look, man. As much as it's what you were just talking about, as far as like I refuse to look away. And
it's dark.
Yeah, and again, take your time, because don't do what I did, where you overexpose yourself and too short of a time.
You have to step away when you go down these rabbit holes.
I got to a point. I've never done this before, where I just stopped and closed my eyes and I couldn't read anymore, man. I couldn't I knew what was coming in the next sentence, and I just couldn't fucking read it, man. You know what I'm saying?
You realize ultimately evil's real, and they take these innocent children and what they do to them. It's just like I said, in that case, it's 100% proving, and the same. All these other kids, and like the Franklin, they're saying kids were killed, and they're making them kill them, and like the lead investigator to that, plane blew up.
Yeah,
he was
Gary Caradori.
He had a lot.
You know what else? They were surveilling his private phone communications, so that's the reason they knew his whereabouts, his movements,
and then
where
he had said
was
that he was literally
the FBI or CIA.
He was reporting back home saying that he had essentially
he was just saying he had the information.
Smoking gun,
exactly, and he was taking his son allegedly to go see a baseball game right in Chicago or some shit, and in reality that was to go actually pass off credible evidence, right, or receive credible evidence from a
so it was literally where he was going.
So he's flying back from receiving the credible evidence with the briefcase that was never discovered in the crash.
I didn't realize. I knew he was close to stuff. I didn't realize he had just went and picked up. I know he was saying he had some serious information. It was about to come down, and boom.
And you brought up True Detective. Like I consider 8mm all the time. The film with Nicolas Cage, which I didn't even know about in the 90s, like 99.
I haven't seen it.
It's like 1999, and
it's
just
truth and fiction.
True, yeah. It's blurring the lines. Truth is far stranger than fiction, right? And that's basically what 8mm is discussing that. They claim that snuff films, right, are some sort of like myth, right? They don't actually, they don't exist. That was legitimately in the 90s. That was
the line.
The line.
And when you get to talk to official sources, it's like, well, maybe that's a thing. But it's like there are basically confirmed instances. I mean, once again, I can't recommend enough. Eye of the Chicken Hawk, really great book on this topic. And a lot of the things we're talking about here, like Dutroux, Finders, all this, are weaving it all in and out. I mean, hell, we didn't even touch on North Fox Island.
North Fox Island,
Oh, here's something real quick that I saw interesting. There was a film made about the Franklin cover-up. Someone bought it and shelved it right before it was going to be released. Bought it just to get an unknown person, named person, bought it and then got rid of it.
An anonymous person, of course.
Isn't that wild? just to make sure that couldn't get out there.
That is what they do. This is Modern Mockingbird.
Carol House's story, we didn't really talk about the Oklahoma City bombing. People go check that out. But she was in an ATF informant, and her story got sold. Her film rights got sold to, who was it? I mean, you probably know, some big Clinton friend. I forget.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they'll buy the story to scrap it. Like, who would do that? Clearly, you're hiding something evil. You're not buying a film about kids being abused just to buy it, to bury it for millions of dollars, probably.
And Paul Bonacci in the Franklin scandal, who he overlaps again. He's not only involved in the Franklin scandal, but it's very interesting, But at the same time, like you had mentioned before, like this kind of like human compromise operation, right? Where they kind of like leverage these poor, like child prostitutes is what they become. And if they've actually been hypno-programmed or mind controlled to specific, or just traumatically abused, to a certain point to where they legitimately embrace this idea that, this is their way of life.
They've been abused enough.
Yeah, man.
That's part of the problem with these cases too. Most of these kids are sexually abused, and then they discredit them that, like, oh, they're doing drugs now and stuff when they get older because they've been abused, so they have these problems. So that they use that to discredit them.
Their statements.
That's how they know they can attack these kids with foster homes and foster care, and seems like they're bringing them across. Like with Ryan Mata, 350,000 missing
Omens,
children,
right? And Bonacci, they've attacked their credibility so much because, I think Aisha, I believe, had MPD, I believe they were calling it at the time. Now they call it dissociative identity disorder, which is essentially the MK Ultra, creating alters. That's basically what that is. So these are people who've experienced incredible trauma at a very young age, which has had an incredible effect on their psyche. And now this is
have some problems.
This is, and they have drug problems, failure to adjust to society, things that and this is exactly the thing that was created by this trauma is exactly what they use to discredit them from the trauma being real.
Man. That is the playbook that they recycle and utilize over time. You consistently, that is the pattern recognition that I appreciate more than anything, because once you have been exposed to the just the level of detail in regard to these cases really presents it as potentially being undeniable at a certain point, because it feels like
you just get so many nodes, so many patterns that you're like, I can't recognize this pattern.
Right.
No, I've seen too much now where I'm like, oh, there's a slight chance, but the more I've researched, the more I'm convinced that there's something. There's 100% something bad going on, but how dark and how extreme, I'm trying to figure out.
Exactly. And the reason I brought up 8mm is because there's honestly, it's important to understand that it ties in North Fox Island, because that was a way that Francis Sheldon...
What's North Fox Island?
Oh, man. North Fox Island was essentially an island off the coast of Michigan up there, and it's
OG Epstein Island that most people don't know of.
Yeah, Epstein Island is just that's one of many. Like people think he's just he's just an employee.
Yeah, exactly. He's middle management, and even by the way, the Black Book was Ghislaine's. I mean, that was really her book.
Exactly.
Yeah, and by the way, Nick Bryant is the one who had the original Black Book published in Gawker way back in the day, and so all this false transparency that's being pushed forward with
such a joke.
And by the way,
Trump did the fake records. That was so embarrassing. That backfired on Trump.
Seriously,
his base is like a cult. He thought they were gonna eat it up, but even them are just like, come on, Trump, this is embarrassing.
Exactly, and that's the problem when you have all of these individuals who are seemingly compromised in the Epstein network now in charge of Epstein disclosure. And like, what are we talking about?
Well, when he was being investigated, even the judge, they were giving him crap for giving such a light deal, and he's like, "Oh, I was told he was high up intelligence to basically leave it alone."
What was it? Trump?
The
Trump
media was told they
couldn't
report on it. Remember, the media they weren't.
Yeah, man.
There was one girl who had a report. She was all excited to go, and they pulled it from her. It just showed the media's in on it.
Yeah, I just listened to that again recently, actually. Yeah, because she got Project Veritas or whatever, right, and got hit up on a hot mic, but it proved the fact that. The producers, right? What is it? ABC or NBC? I can't remember where she was at the time.
Yeah, it was
very big. Yeah, and they had just squashed the story, and they said, "Man, who is Jeffrey Epstein? Who's Ghislaine Maxwell? Who gives a shit?" You know what I mean? And then the story breaks, and it goes obviously just as far as just the massive impact that story had on.
I wonder, like, what's that temple for? That's a weird temple he has on his island. Like, that's not normal to have a temple like that,
brother. And beyond that, there's pedophile symbology that's involved too, with a lot of the like outside the temple. That itself is
like an owl out there or something too.
Oh yeah, Moloch, because that's the Moloch kind of thing, right?
Exactly, child sacrifice.
And they sacrifice. This has been going on for thousands of years too. People need to realize this isn't like Child sacrifice has been going on since written records.
We were talking about multiple times. MK Ultra, creating altars. Think about the awful things you have to do to create altars. And then, well, I mean, I'm not a religious person, but it's like, if you are someone who wants to try to find a way to understand the religious and some of the things of the past from a, I guess, more secular worldview, and if you do accept the concept of like things like trauma-based mind control and stuff like that, like what would that look like from centuries past? How would that be described? Would that be demons, spirits inherent in corpse?
It's like alchemy.
Demons or gods, whatever, Like the Aztecs, like multiple cultures done. It's like all over. It's been child sacrifice.
No doubt.
Not always child, but a lot of times they go for child because of innocence.
And by the way, Kincora, that scandal, the Kincora scandal is Northern Ireland. Essentially, it's involved with Operation Clockwork Orange and how the UK and essentially there was UK intelligence and had really divided and created a strategy of tension, which very much reflects Operation Gladio in just kind of destabilization tactics in Northern Ireland, and had staged sort of kind of like pitted together this civil war, really is what they manufactured, and then exploited that for their own benefit. Just creating essentially the hotel that was nearby the Kincora Boys' Home in Northern Ireland was effectively utilized as a they had audiovisual blackmail, and they had actual intelligence, operatives who were in this hotel where they had these rooms wired for audiovisual blackmail, and they
just like Epstein had it.
And so these hotels, and this is a playbook that Douglas Caddy, who was involved in Watergate. He was the original attorney for the first seven, right? The first seven that had allegedly broken into, the DNC complex. By the way, that's an entirely different story. Has to do with sexual blackmail in the Columbia Plaza operation that was set up like 2 blocks away. It was a prostitution network that was actually
Nixon thing was. I am curious going down that rabbit hole another day too.
Fascinating.
Because the whole Nixon thing, you realize. He's been vilified as like the worst person ever, so it makes you think, maybe the media kind of rewrote some things.
8 episodes on Watergate.
We've done a shit.
We'll have to come back and do that.
Yeah, man.
That's something I've been interested in too. You start looking at like history is like a lot of it's just a lie. People.
The White
write
House Call Girl, brother. That's what it's. That's a book, and it's called. So Heidi Reichen was the prostitute who had basically been. The asset by Joe Nessline, who was the organized crime mafioso, who was essentially holding hands with intelligence and running this human compromise operation with the intelligence apparatus at the time. So you had the CIA using organized crime as plausible deniability to set up a sexual blackmail operation through the DNC complex, where they were then any sort of diplomats who would arrive at the Watergate would essentially. There was a private communication line that was set up in the office that would only, they thought that they would be able to, okay, here's a menu of basically females that fit a profile that you're looking for. And then you call this number, you can then order your prostitute. And so it was, again, another human compromise. And it's very interesting when you look into the fact that John Dean, who was a White House aide at the time, was also married to this woman who was entirely compromised by the network itself and potentially listed in the documents in the DNC.
On bugged houses or things, I was just thinking about Donald Trump. Didn't he buy Maxwell's boat that was said to be Ghislaine Maxwell's dad's boat that was said
No, Adnan Khashoggi.
I mixed up Khashoggi and Maxwell.
Who is this?
Adnan Khashoggi was a weapons dealer. And essentially, Jamal Khashoggi, his brother, or no, not brother. It's like I forget what the relation is, but it's direct though. And he was the one who was actually assassinated,
chopped up by
Mohammed bin Salman.
In Turkey, the guy they got,
Saudi Arabia, right? Yeah, as far as
they got him in Turkey, but Saudi Arabia.
It makes you wonder what's going on there when you know what his family, close family member was about. So
was a weapons dealer for Iran Contra.
Now, obviously, what they did
Iran
was
Contra.
terrible. But that guy, he was a propagandist for Qatar and stuff too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I'm not saying what they did was
Qatar.
right, but he was
like tied in. He's big blackmail network tied in with Maxwell, like tied into those same people. Yeah, like the Promise software, that whole conspiracy.
He wasn't just some innocent journalist.
Yeah,
no, he was running guns during the Iran-Iraq War. To provide plausible deniability for the Western, as far as like the Western Entente, who were essentially, providing this really. Sponsoring both sides of the conflict.
It is weird,
to do.
Like how I see the connection between what's church that guy's name?
The
Queen
Temple of Set.
He was tied
Temple of Set,
to Iran-Contra somehow, too.
Oh, yeah, because he was directly connected with,
He was helping run the
NATO.
guns, too, right? So
And assuming goes through the NATO.
all of
Oliver
other
North
stuff
as
is
well.
all connected.
Yes.
Yeah, Oliver North as well, who was very much considered to be like kind of one of the key components to running, directly running Iran-Contra.
And this is why I keep coming back to NATO. Think about what NATO was. It was a Cold War, like an aftermath of the Cold War thing. Like, we're fighting communism. And you can tie that into anything. It's the ultimate justification. Oh, commies or something. Even though it's like we were fighting wars that didn't really have anything to do with commies and saying commies.
And that was always the justification for Gladio. And Roy Cohn, by the way, Trump's mentor. Where's my Roy Cohn, he says. Uh-oh. He's running little boys for a human compromise operation for sexual
Stop
blackmail.
the commies.
Yeah, this can make my audience uncomfortable. I got a lot of Trump supporters watching.
Good.
Hey, man.
Look, I mean, things I like
Both
about
sides.
it, but you got to be realistic and look at,
exactly.
people won't look at and it's the opposite. The people that hate him, they won't look at the good he's done. And the people that like
This is the
love him won't look at
problem.
the bad. It's like he's got good and bad things
This
about
is the
him.
problem with worshiping false idols, man. These false prophets manufactured by the state, they're political puppets. So you want to support a political puppet when you don't even understand the power paradigm as that we reside in.
They're not out for our best interest.
No, it's not that hard to
People
understand.
think Trump's trying to
He
save
doesn't
him.
care
It's like,
about you.
You really think he cares about you? And like you said, he was tied in with Cohen. Was he?
Dude,
was
it's
he
worse than
involved
that.
With Meyer Lansky, because I know Meyer Lansky was one of the first, first known ones with the blackmail scandals, because he had J. Edgar Hoover blackmailed.
Yep. So I think it's called. Royal, what is it?
Meyer Lansky's like the head of the Jewish mafia. People don't know.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
the kosher
really
mafia.
like the head mafia boss. Really,
kosher
they were
mafia,
with Italian
man.
mafia too. But
Yeah, exactly.
and he's one of the only ones that never went to jail. He more merged with the CIA.
There's a
he
reason.
was doing
exactly.
He was part of all.
He was
these
organized crime.
transitions.
And it went back to Gladio. One thing that's like sometimes left out is Gladio was an unholy union of the mafia, of intelligence, and the Vatican. Yeah.
The unholy alliance.
Yes.
Vatican,
right?
I need to go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
that was their
I'm
money.
definitely seeing the connection
Yeah.
between the intelligence
Which
and the mob.
By the way-
if you get William Ramsey on Knights of Malta, that's an interesting
he's great,
connection.
yeah.
Or
He's
Opus
very
Dei,
cool.
all the Catholic. I mean, your Catholic people might get upset, but there's at least the very tippy top. There's some weird
More
stuff
than
going
that,
on
man.
with Catholicism.
I do need to look at some bad stuff, because like there's the child abuse that was
Yeah.
happening. That was a long time ago, but that was absolutely disgusting.
Well,
So,
they-
like I said, I'm not going to attack Catholics and Christians and stuff, but there does need to be some digging. You do need to root out and say what's bad in your organization.
Well, Opus Dei was directly
absolutely.
implicated in the Dutroux affair, right?
Yeah, 100%. So
Yeah.
is P2.
Who is this?
So they're just secret fraternal organizations,
Catholic,
essentially,
Catholic,
like secret societies is what they're
like,
really.
Opus Dei is explicitly Catholic, though.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. But as far as like, it's very much in the Freemasonic, template of how they function. As far as, I would say, just under or off the radar of the vast majority, unbeknownst to the general public. Like that's kind of how these organizations operate. And so, like, it's not only that. I did an episode on the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment, and essentially, it was. I'm trying to remember. It was the First Lady Roosevelt, Edith Kermit Roosevelt, is the actual woman.
What a name.
Right? Yeah, I know it's a very terrible name, but she essentially says that that basically there is a permanent establishment, and they are very well established and very much in place, no matter who you are allowed to vote for, is essentially what she says. And she actually penned an article saying as much. And that alone is, I think, something worth
If
acknowledging.
voting changed anything, they wouldn't let you do it.
No, good point.
Exactly, man.
No, it's unfortunate reality, you start to say. And also, these people are heavily funded. Latrobe was on welfare, and then he had 10 homes.
man.
Look at Epstein. He was a math teacher to billionaire, and they don't really know where the money comes from. They'll be like, guys were giving him homes.
He had power of attorney for Les Wexner.
Les
He was like a
Wexner.
billionaire part of the MAGA group.
signed
which is
over
like,
power attorney, right?
Which is signing, for those who aren't aware of power of attorney is, I know most people don't, like, I only know this because I was military, so when you deploy, you have to give power of attorney to, like, in case something has happened to you or you're not able to deal with it. That literally, legally speaking, you turn over everything.
Right? I could clear out your banks. I could
Yes,
just do anything.
Exactly. He could,
I am
he could
you.
legitimately, yeah. It's just so
You could divorce
insane.
your wife.
Exactly, man. But here's something I did want to. I just wanted to point this out very quickly because this alone ties in Michael Aquino, and it's
I
something.
think Michael Aquino is a very
That's
crucial
what I
figure.
mean. And I think that, like, once you understand that this is a reality, just right here, this kind of story that I'm about to explain and describe, then you kind of at least you start to embrace the reality that unfortunately there are a lot of cover-ups that are facilitated by federal authorities, and all it has to involve is, again, the intelligence apparatus running domestic covert operations, and so they're always looking for potential cutouts that they create out of whole cloth. I mean, where they then provide the plausible deniability for them to actively pursue their domestic operations. And that's what E. Howard Hunt did. He was a member of, obviously CIA. I think he was the point man in the JFK assassination in Dallas that day. He even got his ears tucked when he went back home and used his child as his as his alibi.
Really?
Right? Which was hilarious to me because his wife as well, Dorothy Hunt, she was actually murdered in a plane crash while she was serving as like the paymistress for all the Watergate burglars. And it's the craziest story.
The Watergate thing's weird.
I'm telling you, man.
But no, there's so many mysterious deaths in these cases. Like I said, I mentioned the lead detective in Franklin, but wasn't there a bunch of other deaths in that? I think a lot of witnesses were. Man. All seemed like murders. They'll say suicides.
Exactly. But I think the most important one was what you had spotlighted earlier with the Gary Caradori, right? The lead investigator who was potentially, not potentially, but actually bringing forward the evidence.
Yeah. Boom.
Yeah, exactly.
What a coincidence.
But there was a bunch too. It's not just that. And I said it was 20 or more in the Doe chase.
In Detroit, yeah. 100%. But here's what's so insane because like the Presidio case in San Francisco, listen to what Ed Albanoski finds, the MP, the military police. He says, inside a concrete bunker behind the military intelligence building at the Presidio, the words Prince of Darkness are painted boldly in red on one wall. This is right before the Presidio case breaks, right? This is the explanation. So used decades ago to house artillery guns, the reinforced concrete batteries appear to have been converted to something like ritual chambers. Emblazoned next to the Prince of Darkness is the word die and what looks like a list of names painted in red that have been crossed out with heavy black paint. One wall is covered with the numeral 666, a sign of the devil, and occult drawings. A clearing in the center of the concrete floor apparently was exposed and filled with refuse and partly burned logs. And on the front wall beneath the window that faces the military intelligence building is a huge pentagram. Inside a circle, and in the rear where sunlight gives way to darkness, white and black candles dripping sit atop a dome-shaped recession in the wall, apparently a crude altar. Incense sticks lie half-burned to the side. So at another battery farther up Lincoln Boulevard, a large drawing of Satan with red eyes and horns appears on an outside concrete wall. Doors to the battery are secured shut. There are no windows to climb through. No entry is possible here. And then he continues to say, this is easy to dismiss, obviously, the satanic graffiti as just pranks or something, or taking advantage of the isolated bunkers to play new versions of Dungeons and Dragons or some shit. But Albanoski recalls, we got a call from the Portola MacArthur housing area. One person reported a man dressed in black holding a little girl's hand running toward the park. Another call came in, saying they heard screams near the creek. The search led to a gardener's shack at Julius Kahn Park, a strip of city-owned playground adjacent to the Presidio, behind the housing area. We heard noises coming from inside. We kicked the door open, and here's this nice little bedroom. In a corner was a mannequin with a gun aimed at the door. Wow. Like, when you witness, this is a ritual, as far as like this actual setting that they discovered here. I mean, they were filming inside of this area. So in my mind, once you discover what was actually found, as far as like Michael Aquino and his wife Lilith, who ran the Temple of Set.
Lilith. And I can remember her name. I just want to point out that's who Jordan Peterson interviewed for a Satanic Panic. Lilith.
That's
literally
insane.
Lilith.
So
for anyone who knows the significance of
her husband
Lilith.
was one of the Satanists, and they brings his wife on to be like, oh, it's just a Satanic Panic. Good old Jordan Peterson doing great investigations.
Lilith. For those who understand the Bible, that was like the first female demons.
Yeah.
And her husband's also literally tied in with all these like cases, Iran Contra,
exactly.
like the Franklin case.
It's like in your face.
Detroit, it's like,
and that's what Paul Bonacci had claimed, that essentially Michael Aquino had actually been the one responsible for ordering the abduction of Johnny Gosch, who was a paperboy. And
where was this at?
So
is this in Belgium or in the U.S.?
No, this is in the U.S., right? This is in Idaho, I believe, was actually where it was. And it's very interesting because once you realize what was actually taking place is that there was a fetish, a paperboy fetish, that was some interesting aristocratic family, and the patron of the aristocratic family was actually ordering through Michael Aquino, a paperboy fetish. And once the Johnny Gosch case, apparently Johnny Gosch's mother had come forward and said that there are going to be additional abductions around this area, and this is going to be the timing that it actually occurs, and it occurred. And these paperboys go missing. And it turns out that Jacob Wetterling was apparently ordered as kind of a reaction to a botched abduction that took place, where they were initially trying to abduct another paperboy and it went wrong, and so they then abducted Jacob Wetterling, and his father was involved, and they effectively ritually murdered Jacob Wetterling, and it ties in this North Fox Island network where they had a publication where you would pay a specific amount to this publication, right? This private publication, which then would provide you with, based on the tier that you were, effectively a part of and paying for, you would then get a specific set of let's say whatever your fetish may be, and that is what you are specifically.
It's a subscription-based model.
Yeah, it's a subscription-based model. They're tailoring toward your fetish. And basically, if you pay them enough, then you can actually fly to North Fox Island and participate in human hunting parties, which is another part of the Dutroux case.
When you said that just I remember that. It's like that just sparked that up. It's yeah. What was that? There was other murders that were hunted. The kids said that happened, right? But then the police went. They went.
There were multiple victims in the X dossier that did make claims to either being aware of, or I believe even maybe being. I don't think any of them actually. Now that I recall, I don't think any of them claimed to actually be involved in the hunting parties, but I think some of them claimed to be aware of them. So, but then also you have the North
missing
Fox
people
one,
and stuff too is the crazy part, and bodies that were found. It wasn't just like random, like they're out hunting people. They would let them go and chase them with Dobermans and hunt them down.
Exactly.
Shit out of movies. It
The thing you think of in movies. Yeah, where you're literally hunting down a human being and then just.
But they were doing this in Belgium.
Yep. And also not only that, off the coast of Michigan in an island. So literally in the United States, in domestic U.S. They were doing this. I mean, we go, in the Caribbeans, Epstein Island, like no, literally off the coast of Michigan. I guess that'd be in the Bay part of it, but it's like, literally in Michigan, just right there.
A couple years ago, you see the crypto guy. He tweeted out like, my girlfriend is CIA and Mossad. They're running a blackmail operation here. They're going to torture and kill me.
Oh my God! There you go.
An underage pedo operation, blackmail operation. He said,
"Wow."
There's just so much evidence pointing to something being there.
Mm-hmm.
That's honestly something that really made me pause whenever I was investigating the Dutroux case was, not only the Abersacs connection with the occult, but it was much more involved with the sadistic form of abuse that was taking place, right? And I won't go into too much detail, obviously, because obviously,
people that want to look it up. I mean, regular person's not.
We're getting ready to actually. Me and you will. I mean, by the time this probably comes out, we'll probably actually have it started. But we're getting ready to start a Dutroux series as well. Me and him have actually both covered on it.
But for like a month because the other one.
Yeah,
I definitely want to. Have to be in the mood, but I want to dig deeper into the trail because it is just.
And that's where we would go into the nasty details. I mean, I know when I covered it once on the morning show when I read a little bits of like a mega piece throughout, and there were parts I just had to be like, guys, I can't read this. This is too much.
It's like. It's crazy that I'd never heard of that case, and it was a huge deal in Belgium. There was like huge, massive protests. People were pissed off because it was very obvious their government was covering it up. The highest people, were just like, "Oh, we're not investigating this." The people there were just like, "What the fuck? You're not going to investigate this DNA evidence you have, the cases, the cops are being promoted that were in on it."
Great example of civil disobedience.
100%. And after you understand the fact that Dutroux, as I mentioned earlier, had mentioned the fact that he says. He abducted girls with police help. That's what he says. And
seems pretty obvious that it's true.
And his lawyer also said that during the trial proceedings, he says, "I speak not only as a lawyer, but also as a citizen and father." He says, he was not the only devil, talking about Dutroux. Out of the 6,000 hair samples that were found in the
6,000.
basement cellar, where some of the victims were held, 25 unknown DNA profiles were discovered. There were people in that cellar that are not now accused. The prosecution never attempted to match those DNA profiles to people implicated in the case. The girls that survived were mentioning people they had seen on television, prominent politicians, established members of the Catholic clergy. John Wedger, he claims to have good information. He's former Scotland Yard detective. He specifically investigated a lot of these, child trafficking operations in the UK. He's an amazing resource, honestly. And he himself, he says, to have good information on a member of the clergy who was involved in the killing of 2 of the girls at a party. And I won't mention how he killed them, honestly, man, because it's too much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fucked up shit.
It's
man.
fucked
Fuck
up.
these people. And how the fuck are they not going to investigate those hair samples,
That's what I'm saying, man.
Like how enraged must these fucking parents be? And they're just like, that's why they're marching in the streets. And they're just like, nope, we're not going to run them.
That's the power paradigm
fucking
here.
ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. That's I think that might be the currency underneath
that's
it
why we
all.
can't let them take our guns away.
Yeah. People talk about the value of the dollar being backed up by our military. I'm like, I don't know. I think it might be backed up by a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my
Literal,
mind.
the suffering of children. So.
And it seems likely they were videotaping this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt. And the same thing happened with the Son of Sam murders.
I don't know anything about that. I know who he was, but I don't know any details.
David Berkowitz.
Like any of these things, you have to spend a lot of time actually researching them because you're hear so many different narratives. You have to that's why I take one issue at a time because I try not to give a strong opinion on stuff until I actually dig in.
I understand that. That's why I really do try and understanding the consequence of being wrong in regard to these cases specifically.
That's what I'm talking about now, especially now my podcast is getting bigger. I got to be like, I better be careful what. When I talked to Ryan Mata on the phone, I forget who introduced me. Maybe it was like Stu Peters or Ian Carroll. He sounded legit, but what he was saying just sounded so crazy to me. I'm like, bro, I can't really 350,000 missing kids coming through mostly from Guatemala. That just can't be right. And then you send me the government documents and maybe half the kids, 2/3 of the kids are explained for it, but that would still be 100,000 missing kids.
Yeah.
Like where do those kids go?
Yeah, exactly. And Michael Aquino with Lilith, right, his wife, what did they do? You were talking about these various sophisticated techniques that they would utilize for trauma-based mind control. Mm-hmm. They reversed their gender roles when they abused the children. So essentially what they would do is Michael Aquino would dress as a woman and Lilith would dress as a man, and then they would sexually abuse a child. And imagine what that does to you psychologically. I mean, you're 5 years old.
And it probably sounds less believable. And it's like, just sounds so crazy.
I mean, I'm sure, Spearman, you're former UFC fighter. You've done so much training, working out, this and that. You understand the concept of like muscle confusion. There's something to that, I think, with trauma. And while obviously we don't want to get into specifics and stuff, that is probably the most digging into, especially the specifics, the documents, the ecstasy of the story is one of the most nauseating, and like the specifics and the odd, bizarre, different types of, just abuse, just so many different bizarre, weird ways. And if you understand the concept of trauma-based mind control and what they're trying to drive towards, and especially if you then apply that to something as simple as like muscle confusion or something, that it kind of makes sense. Where you're like, if you are applying trauma, if you say you do the same sort of trauma, let's say you just do generic rape, just the normal run-of-the-mill, whatever. Like obviously it's all bad, but like just normal, nothing weird, no changing into being a woman or whatever. It's just, you do that a few times and like, obviously it's always going to be traumatic, but it's like you get accustomed to some extent. But now if you swap it up, you do something different, you do something that keeps
the trauma
bizarre, just throws off your reality to where you're like, what is even going on here? Especially as a young child. It's just imagine how that just completely skews your reality.
No, dude. I mean, it makes it even worse. Every time it's traumatic, you don't know what's going to do. Confusion, like I said, it's probably tied into MK Ultra. The same shit they're doing, trying all this different
what they did
shit.
to Regina with Regina Loof, the X1 victim.
Who's that?
The Dutroux dossier.
Yeah, they're listed X1, X2, X3. X1's the most popular one, the one we know of, Regina Loof, who legitimately basically got doxxed by the investigator. The second batch of investigators, the corrupt investigators, after they kicked off the good investigators initially on the case.
Yeah, it's crazy. They kicked off investigators. I mentioned they switched the judges. They also switched investigators when they're doing too good. Lots of them were killed.
Exactly, man. And once you find out that, like you had mentioned earlier, like the kind of the phases of some of these victims that they go through, right? Once you age out, they call it the end circuit. That's apparently what they call it, the end circuit. And this is where you better provide your prominent
useful.
role.
They'll kill you, or you
they'll
better start
fucking kill
abusing
you.
kids with them. Or
Exactly. And that's what Paul Bonacci said, is that they picked up in private planes with Larry King in the Franklin scandal. They flew from, I think it was Nevada, or no,
through
it was
tunnels
Arizona.
first. I think they said again. I could be wrong about that one, but again, the tunnels. It sounds too crazy to be
for
true.
For sure. But he says that he with Lawrence King, right, Lawrence E. King, from the Franklin scandal and the Franklin Credit Union, that they decide they're flying in a private plane. Mm-hmm. They go to Denver, Colorado, and they apparently abduct a child. They pick up some child that is involved in the network and compromised in the network, or at the very least had been abducted by the network. And they pick this kid up, and then they proceed to go to another airport, another destination. I forget the actual area it was, and they pick up an individual with a bunch of camera equipment, right? And then Paul Bonacci and this newly procured victim on this private plane with this guy they just picked up with all this sophisticated camera equipment, they then proceed to the final destination where they completely sexually abuse this child in the most sadistic manner, to where, one, Paul Bonacci, I watched the video of him being interrogated and giving this statement. And it's one of the most, tragic statements that you could ever imagine witnessing. And Paul Bonacci himself was describing the abuse that he witnessed happen with this child, and how he was trying to tell him that everything's going to be okay, even though he knew it wasn't going to be. And then he himself would witness on camera, by the way, being forced to contribute as a member of the abuse.
Kids hurt each other too, right?
Yes.
That's a common thing I've noticed.
They would make
these.
Oh yeah, and they would make X1, the Regina Loof victim, and Mark Dutroux. They said that, as far as she claimed that in the X dossier that again, she's procuring victims just like Paul Bonacci. All right, she's turned out by her grandmother, which is one of the craziest scenarios ever.
That's crazy. Sometimes this stuff gets passed down by their family.
Generational.
What just like
generational abuse.
Yep.
Like, how could you even imagine doing something like that?
It sucks that you realize there's truly evil out there.
True Detective was
evil,
like,
brother.
Once again, truth and fiction. I don't think it's so often you see these things, and I think a lot of times it is like a revelation of the method. I really think, watch True Detective season 1. I think that really does kind of like,
dude, what did
there's
Joaquin
so much
Phoenix tell Nicolas Cage's character in 8mm? He says, talking about snuff films, talking about the next layer of what you are going to find in the sadistic corner of intelligence. Oh, no, not just intelligence, but obviously the underground, the pedophile underground. You're going to discover the fact that, he says, I found this insane. He goes, you dance with the devil don't change. The devil changes you. Mm-hmm. And that stuck with me forever since I watched that, man. Like, because honestly, as much as I don't want, is what we were basically suggesting earlier. I refuse to turn my eye. I refuse to look away. This is something that, who am I to say that? Oh, my delicate sensibility can't handle the excruciating details of what someone else went through.
What happened to them? Yeah, even
Fuck that.
That's how bad it is. It's hard even reading it. That's how bad it is.
And that's what I feel, internally. But I have to just overcome.
I think at the same time, you have to take breaks too.
You're totally right, brother.
You could do it for a second, then like, I gotta
take a while, break, music for a while.
And I think God,
because I'll get like obsessed for I go like a day where I can't stop. Then I'm like, dude, I need to
that's what I mean.
A workout or something, something different.
Twist my mind, like reading this shit.
The devil changes you, right?
No, another dark one is like Pizzagate. Now there's parts of it seem really real. Then they send in a shooter. Oh, now all of a sudden you can't talk about it. I don't know if we can talk about it on YouTube. I put this on there still.
I will say that my Pizzagate episode got straight up nuked right away as soon as I covered it.
I don't know if I can talk about this because it's like that goes to the very. Okay, let's just look at it this way. Like, if you walked into my house and I had pictures of kids like tied up, being molested and demons, you probably wouldn't really want to be friends with me.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
But then these guys, the elites of DC, who's the one that has the art? Podesta.
The Podesta emails.
His art. Look up Podesta art. People watch him if you haven't
both
seen
of
it.
them, the Podesta brothers.
It's like some creepy. If I watch you guys' house, I'm sorry, I ain't being your friend if you guys have that art up. I'm like, dude, you're a fucking weirdo if you have that shit on you.
Absolutely.
I'd be creeped out if I walked in.
And then he has some of the most powerful friends in the world. So makes you wonder.
The Podesta brothers' artwork. So John Podesta, founder of the George Soros-funded Center for American Progress, just so everyone's aware.
Tied in with Soros too. I didn't even know that. Shouldn't be surprised.
He served as Bill Clinton's White House chief of staff. And in 88, John and his brother Tony, I think is the most fucked up. I'm not quite certain, but I think that he was actually named in the oh man, what was the name of the girl from Colorado that was abducted? That
kidnapping case that people.
Yes. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name right now.
The Ramsey, that
yeah,
one?
yes, John Benet Ramsey.
Yeah,
yes, that's it. Yeah.
yeah.
So there are deep, sinister connections involved with that case
Really?
as well. Yes, man.
I
And I think the parents might have been involved as well, because just like Jacob Wetterling in the abduction and ritual killing of Jacob Wetterling, who was the paperboy fetish that tied in with Johnny Gosch, the same sort of scenario, is taking place with the John Benet Ramsey case, which I found very strange. And again, you have all these intelligence connections and wealthy aristocratic families that are involved in this ritual killing, which I think, but John Benet Ramsey, I'm going to have to do an entire episode one day on that case.
Yeah,
but
I don't know enough about that case.
Yeah.
But I will say that you mentioned the Podesta artwork, and this is what I found insane. Tony Podesta's favorite artist was a British woman by the name of Kim Noble. And Noble, she happens to create trauma-based art while suffering from dissociative identity disorder.
What we're talking about, yeah.
As a result of being abused in the Project Monarch mind control program, which uses sexual trauma as a method to fracture the psyche and control the mind.
Looks like she made herself useful. Is she lucky
So
that
it's
Podestas
all
are such art lovers?
connected, Yeah, the mind control is connected with the abuse.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and Edgar Madison Welch, I did find this hilarious that
Shot the hard drive.
yeah, he goes
He
in.
comes in and shoots the hard drive, right?
Yeah, man.
And now all of a sudden we can't talk about Pizzagate.
Yeah.
Do you know what Edgar Madison Welch's connections are? Because this is the
No, that's right. I don't
funniest
know much
thing.
about it. I just know I saw that and I'm like, this is
Dude,
all bullshit.
I'm telling you right now,
They make
man.
it sound crazy until you actually look. So they
Yeah.
don't want you, see what this Pizzagate stuff's doing. It's
Right.
making people come in and shoot up the school that happens to have the pedo sign outside.
Man, what a great way.
I had a guy who DM'd me. He had some really interesting DM exchanges between Elfon, the guy that owns the pizza place.
Olafonte?
James Olifantis.
Some really
James
interesting stuff
Olifantis.
about maybe coming on, but it's like I'm a little concerned with lawsuits confirming it. Like,
Dude,
but he had
James
some, he had some
Olifantis-
interesting exchanges between him.
I think he had a kill dungeon, honestly, and that basically they had a refrigerated room that they would keep the corpses in for a certain amount of time, and that basically they would also have you remember the bands that they would have at the
Dude, they were clearly openly pedophiles, and did you see the
Pedophilic symbology
Instagram
as well.
like comments
Yeah.
people
Oh
leaving?
my
That is
God.
not
Insane.
normal behavior.
Hashtag kill
I'm not going
room.
to put a picture of a baby and be like weird sexual comments, and like
Yeah.
if you posted a
That's what I'm
baby, made a comment, like that's a freak. There's
Like,
we
haha,
joke
yummy
around,
or whatever
we have bad humor and
things,
stuff,
like-
but that goes beyond
And
like.
isn't
eating
it
some
like
pizza
some
or whatever.
ancient? I don't think it's Egyptian, but it's definitely like very similar to ancient Egyptian god that James Olifantis is utilizing a false name essentially that is play on words.
What is Set? Is it that the temple of Set?
It's
is that the
very
same god?
similar.
I think
It's
that's
very
kind of
similar. Yeah, because what you're dealing with essentially is really like, man, I don't know, when you try and like process, right, like the ancient nomenclature that they're utilizing, these ancient deities, right, that very much represent exactly what they seemingly are pursuing as far as like their sadistic goals and objectives, then yeah, you have to really kind of like reflect and take a step back and kind of like attempt to, at least conceptualize for yourself, like potentially what could be taking place if the fact of the matter is that they are legitimately using symbology at the level to where they claim a false name that represents an ancient deity that legitimately raped children. What happens when that's the actual case? And that's what James Olifantis represents as the name itself represents, like in French. Oh man, I'm trying to remember now. Like it's legitimately suggesting the fact that he's attracted to young boys, right? And so
Hermes, maybe? Is it like a different version of Hermes? Because Hermes was associated with
James
that as well.
Olifantis translates right to a specific term, right? That essentially invokes that conceptual idea, and so that alone, combined with, again, listen to this right here, because this is insane. You want to talk about Edgar Madison Welch involved with Pizzagate, right? We have Best the Pizza. All right. The name of this logo, by the way, this is a pizza place that is right down, 3 doors down from Comet Ping Pong Pizza. All right. This is an infrastructure that's in place in DC. And I think the reason that I actually, I'm not trying to get you pulled or anything, but the reason that my Pizzagate episode was pulled,
we can always like clip stuff out. It's
Exactly,
unfortunate that we have to do that though.
Rumble exclusive.
The fact that we have to cut this out on YouTube, what does that say?
Yeah, exactly, man. But I truly do believe that this is emblematic of an active child sex trafficking network that is very well established in Washington, D.C. at this very moment. And I think that once you understand kind of like, not even like Anthony Weiner and Uma Abedin and these strange connections to, I mean, as much as it's not exactly confirmed, right? But Frazzle Drip is
well, they had all the cops that supposedly died. I don't know how true that is.
Alleged snuff film or whatever.
Potentially Hillary and Uma Abedin, right? Yeah, but here's the crazy part: Best of Pizza, 3 doors down from Comet Ping Pong. It has a logo. This logo happened to identically resemble the boy lover pedophile symbol. And it's a code symbol based on the 2007 declassified FBI document. So it's not as if this is some
it's the well-known
made
pedo
up
symbol.
Yeah, exactly. And so interestingly, you have Pizzagate investigators pointing out that Best of Pizza quickly changed their logo in order to remove the pedophile code symbol for boy love.
Sorry, real quick. True Detective, we've referenced this multiple times. The pedo symbol is featured in multiple times. That came out like right before, because as I say, Revelation of the Method, they came out like right before Pizzagate and before Epstein.
And Disney cartoons threw it in there too.
There you go. It's asymmetric warfare in a way, right? Predictive programming in many ways. You look at these insane, scandalous events that really just seem as if they've been like, they seemingly provide a pretext, as far as like dystopian legislation, right? Like very, very much some sort of like justification for pursuing some totalitarian agenda. And that's what always seems to play out perfectly. It's never some sort of actually honest, pursuit of justice in any way in regard to these networks. But this is hilarious because the IMDb page that's connected to Edgar Madison Welch, right? The Pizzagate shooter,
the hard drive
who went
shooter.
into Comet Ping Pong. So it's absolutely insane. You have, of course, pedophile code symbol for boy love. There's an even more head-scratching connection. You have Best of Pizza, owned by Andrew Klein, who happens to be one of 4 attorneys for the Department of Justice serving in the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit in the Civil Rights Division as a Clinton appointee. So, I mean, like, what do you do at that point?
So many ties.
Yeah,
exactly.
Doesn't stop. Keeps going.
It doesn't. And so beyond that, obviously, you have a nationwide training as far as like this individual. He provides nationwide training to United States attorneys on the prosecution of child trafficking cases. Wow. That was the role that he performed.
So it's like they're investigating and doing the stuff that they're doing.
Man, I'm investigating myself, and I find no real issue here.
Well, it's like in the Finder's case, one of it was the child. It wasn't one of the entities that shut it down. It was like they had a child. I forget it was CPS or no, it was a. They had some sort of child.
I don't know the exact organization. But that was like heavily.
Yeah, the CIA.
It's an internal matter. We'll take over. Yeah, people should definitely read up on that one because that one's crazy.
It really is.
It was this massive cult doing proven satanic rituals.
Oh, yeah.
They had these kids. They had guides on kidnapping kids. They had all kinds of stuff, making it look like it was a worldwide trafficking thing.
Again, it's like they were actually procuring children from the Chinese embassy. And they had, again, that peer-to-peer, private communication system set up in 1987 already, where they're legitimately ordering a child from the Chinese embassy from a contact they had within the Chinese embassy. Yeah. So that alone, then...
Yeah, Ryan Mata says they can come through the border. Hopefully Trump shut this down, but they'd have like a phone number. They would call it and just give it to the kid. No DNA test, nothing. Just hand the kids over to them. And there were just hundreds of thousands they were bringing through. And then most of them went missing after.
Wow.
Well, I don't know what percentage-wise, but 350,000.
Ted Gunderson says they auction off children within this network in Vegas.
I hope he's wrong.
I hope he's wrong.
It's just like so dark, like
yeah.
I stumbled across his work recently, and I was like, oh my god, this is Like he's, I mean, I've only looked a little bit, done a lot.
Yeah.
There's so many different groups. Like, I mean, is there any other big ones that are worth touching on? That,
Man, I mean, there are plenty, brother. And honestly, we barely even scratched the surface.
Exactly. We'll go a
which
little
is
bit
just-
longer, but there's no way we can get it all.
There's no way.
I think we really actually kind of covered a lot of it, but I mean,
We
if there's
did the
anything
best we
particularly
could,
you wanna-
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean, without
just-
overcrowding it, you know.
you know how
So,
you know how I am. I can't help it
Yeah.
as far as like,
We got like
there's
10
so
more
much
minutes just
more.
to chat and bullshit.
That's cool.
Yeah, where should people though look up when they want to go more deep into this?
I'm telling you now, like, I think it's very important to first of all go over the finder's documents where you had the McMartin tunnels exposed throughout in the middle of the
FBI
documents.
document show this crack that came
Exactly.
out in 2019.
Yes,
it kind of quietly came out.
Quietly came out, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the document disclosure, it's
not even
a map of
connected,
the tunnels.
It's what's weird is they're not supposed to be connected, those two.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So why would that be?
Why?
In the
I have
document?
heard the fair explanation is someone in one of the I posted about this the other day, and actually in your replies, and someone was in there saying, and this is actually believable, and does correspond with FBI activities where they will sometimes, I guess it's a pretty common practice where they will put files in places where they don't belong. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit conspiratorial here, and I think there's a connection, but the reasoning being, and I have seen this, I can't tell you how many times and in different cases, so it's not even a common thing, where they do things like misspell things on purpose. Like Strassmeyer, the character we talked about in the Oklahoma City episode, like that, like there in so many FBI documents, it's spelled entirely wrong. For one, it is a complicated name, but there's other people, and there's a character named Dennis Mahon, many other people with incorrect spellings. But how this works is, let's say you make a FOIA document, you make a FOIA request, and you say, I want Strassmeyer, but you spell it the correct way. Now they're searching documents and they don't find it, you know?
So I see
like,
what you're saying.
so
They
same thing
deliberately
with
make it
this
so
if
it
you
doesn't
put it in the
pop up.
wrong spot. But like now we'll say if you put things in the wrong spot or something, you know, you file it in the wrong place intentionally, being like that way when somebody FOIAs it later, it doesn't pop out. Then it's like, you know, but now then you end up with the incidental thing with now you have the flip side where you can accidentally, you know, drop it in a
Stumble
different
across it,
one,
yeah.
you know. So I don't know if I buy that. I do think it's likely because there's probably something in there connecting the
Weird,
two,
though, to
but
be
it is
the
a
finder's one.
Yeah.
But it is always good to look at both sides. You don't want to
Yeah.
get too tunnel vision where you're like this. You need to step back sometimes and be like, okay.
And you got to understand
what
they
are the
play these games.
counter-arguments?
Yeah, they play these games to confuse info too.
No,
So
a lot of the stuff
Yeah.
like they'll purposely you know, put out bad articles
exactly.
or send a guy to shoot up the hard drives and all
Exactly.
Pizzagate's bullshit.
Flood the landscape with disinformation. You know, it's a key as far as like a strategy that they continually use, right? Which makes a lot of sense. It's how you kind of form misconceptions in the first place. But I don't know, man. Ted Gunderson himself, as far as his opinion and perspective on the finders, like that always resonated with me, and it's something that I think people should, at the very least, read up on, and also consider the fact that, again, as much as people kind of question the credibility of Ted Gunderson due to his you know, just the fact that he ran the LA field office of the FBI and has a background in the bureau, like obviously you can't fully trust the source if you know. I mean,
all
it's
FBI
difficult.
agents are bad though. Some of them have to be looking
That's
for
what I'm
the
saying.
truth.
Exactly, and I have not come. I've not come upon any sort of like reason to question any of the actual evidence that has been put forward by Gunderson, because every single aspect of it has kind of like really kind of proved out. As
I mean,
far
most
as
of the stuff, even within our politics circles, I feel like a lot of it's shaded by people. Go, oh, look, he's so incredible and stuff. Or when we're like,
they don't provide
but
any
it's
real
like,
evidence.
But is it just because that was shaped? Because you got to think the statements he was making at the time,
Yeah.
and they did sound pretty freaking crazy. Like,
It sounds pretty fucking crazy.
yeah.
if
So
you
you're
look.
like, you do see how people be like, look, how crazy is he's making it look absurd, and you're like, well, I don't know if he's telling the truth. And you look back at it now, knowing things we know now, and you're like, I don't know, that dude looked like he was basically speaking prophecies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And also, of course, there's going to be some good FBI agents.
Yeah.
There was one right before September 11th. What's the name? I think it might have been John O'Sullivan.
I know who you're talking about.
But he was like, he uncovered the Israeli spy operation in Hollywood, Florida. And he was like trying to go to his heads. We got to shut this down. An Israeli spy operation. They switched him over to the World Trade Center right
There
before.
you go.
And then he got killed in the September. Like, how
it's
crazy
just like
is that?
the
Problem
official
solved.
in the that was basically really pushing back on. Have you ever? There's a book called Visas for Al Qaeda, and it's essentially this basically it's this individual blowing the whistle who was a part of the organization that was providing the actual visas.
Visas for him,
Yeah. And essentially what happened is that the CIA was overruling all of the actual hijackers passports that were being denied.
And they're saying bring him through.
They were saying bring it through. It's above your your pay grade, basically.
Yeah.
And when he blew the whistle, yeah, he was relocated and intentionally, silenced, right? And that it was achieved. You know what I mean?
It's crazy how if you have to see these organizations work together, you see like Mossad and CIA, you realize they work like hand in hand.
Yep.
Oh, there's no real distinction.
Like
Left
the
hand, right
mafia
hand.
a little bit too. Particularly the mafia, they've more turned into the mafia. Like, the Italian mafia got broken up and the Jewish mafia kind of merged into the CIA intelligence
I mentioned
agency.
this when you called the other day. Essentially, I had said this on Tinfoil Hat on our Operation Gladio episode. It truly is seemingly one whole perverse network that leads into the other. There's no real distinction between CIA and the Mossad.
This is why when we talked, I said, "Hey, these 2 episodes we're doing, these are one interconnected thing right here."
Man, and if we had
it is all really connected.
Yeah.
and if we had 6 more hours,
we could establish those connections even more.
Yeah.
Each of these, we could easily go like 10 hours on the phone.
It's crazy,
We
brother.
like barely scratched the surface of the
I know,
fighters. That
man.
one, we're kind of just given an overcourse.
We
of some
really
of these
did.
things.
That's basically
We have
all we
plenty
did,
of
yeah.
work between both of us, and so to go check out on your own.
What's your
true,
guys' platforms one more time? So people can know?
Yeah, I have the No Way Jose podcast. As I've mentioned before, me and him do 2 shows together.
Yeah.
We do a weekly live call-in show that's at Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and then we also do a Monday through Friday daily show. I don't know, maybe every now and then we miss it, but for the most part, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. Pacific. That's kind of just a daily show. We kind of hang out with you guys, audience involvement, covering the current events, maybe some old deep cuts. Then also I have obviously then my solo stuff, mostly interview type stuff, and so that's that's on No Way Jose on all the major all the major platforms, audio, video, Rumble, all the usual. So you can follow me on Twitter at Tower Gang Jose as well. I do want to give a big shout out. We talked about the last episode, but this is going to go out later, so this is even more key. I do want to remind you guys, Bro Grove. So June 20th and June 21st, we will be at Leesburg, Florida. We're going to be kind of shutting down a whole little street and kind of having a sweet little party.
I'm trying to come to that too.
Hell yeah,
I'm not
dude.
confirming, but I'll hit up Top Lobster's the guy to talk to that.
We got
definitely.
we got Sammy and Owen kind of, I guess, sort of both headlining, just different nights.
Both friends of mine.
So Sam
we need some
Tripoli
good
and Owen
laughs
Benjamin,
after that
yeah.
dark
Oh,
episode.
man.
We need to
We got Shane Cashman showing up. It's gonna kick
I
ass.
don't think I know
Yeah.
Shane, but I like.
He's great.
I both
Yeah.
like Sam and Owen a lot.
Yeah.
So
You'll love Shane. Shane's
I'm gonna
great.
make them either be friends again or fight.
Yeah.
You gotta fight or be
right.
friends again.
Hey, man, we need to have some sort of actual. I don't know.
They should be friends again.
That's
They were
what I
friends for
mean.
like 20
Yeah,
years.
it drives me insane, but it's okay. I understand. There's a certain dynamic.
Yeah, there's
that-
always 2 sides of your story.
Exactly.
Yes.
I was just up at Owens last week in Idaho. He has the most beautiful ranch.
bet.
It's insane. The mountains around it, clear. I just walked up there. I was like, wow, this is like.
I just respect and admire living by your principles. In a real way that you can. Your family, your direct family can benefit from. I mean, that alone is isn't that the kind of the goal at this moment? It's really all we can control.
You got to control your family and become yourself. Take care of yourself and family first. Yeah, you can't get too caught up in other stuff because
Right.
there's only so much you can control. You can try to expose it, but you really got to take care of your family.
Which is why I try and steer clear of the black pill as much as I can, because as much as I feel like all I want to do is kind of, as much as it's the philosophical kind of, inverse and opposite of what I practice. Like, you want to bury your head in the sand. I understand.
exactly.
Yeah, I understand that kind of instinct and reaction, but we owe the victims more than that. You know what I mean? And that alone, just actually being exposed to what the hell that these people have unfortunately gone through and suffered. Yeah, who the fuck am I to essentially put myself above that in a way to where I can kind of turn a blind eye? Absolutely not, man.
I felt an obligation to,
That's what inherently.
Well, same thing, a separate subject, but with the Palestine thing, it was just I could see right and wrong, I could see evil, and people go, oh, you're anti-Semitic. It's like, I'm not anti-Semitic, not wanting to fucking watch thousands of kids to get blown up. I don't want Jewish kids to die.
It's like what
either,
Trump said in regards to the Russia thing when he was campaigning. It's, oh wow, it seems like this is gone now, but I just want the killing to stop. That's all I want.
I just don't want people to die.
I just want the killing to stop. That's it.
Yeah, and of course issues are complicated sometimes, but I can know it's not complicated just to fucking relentlessly bomb.
Yeah.
And the thing in Gaza, they have nowhere to go. It's I think it's 5 miles by fucking 30 miles. They can't leave. It's not like a regular war where people can flee. They're just oh, move here, we get bombed. Move there, we get bombed.
Right.
It's just,
They were bombing safe zones,
Yeah, it's if it's anti-Semitic, speak against that, then I don't care.
Yeah, then I guess that's what I am. Whatever.
Where you have to put truth first.
Yeah.
As someone says, I don't care if something's anti-Semitic. I care if it's true.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all.
you know.
And why would we like understand the reason that I named my podcast The Underclass was because I honestly believe that like we're witnessing this kind of like, not in any sort of, Marxist terms, but we're witnessing class warfare play out in real time. And there's a huge gap. And I'm only attempting to psychologically bridge that gap as much as I possibly can to hopefully understand, again, this working fundamental conceptual outline of how power truly functions, how the strings are pulled by this elite aristocratic, unelected bureaucracy that seems to override any real, it's honestly a destiny betrayed. That's what we've experienced, and it's the name of the book that James D. Eugenio wrote on the JFK assassination. I always found that as one of the most beautiful titles ever put forward, honestly, because in pop culture and in a way, because it does embody, just kind of like the path that we're currently set on, and unfortunately, I feel like it's going to take a lot of people, engaging and grappling with the actual unfortunately, it's the most just sort of destructive details that can kind of like, in a way, it can sort of like, I don't know, it can eat away at your foundational principles in a way if you don't quite like ground yourself. And I feel like, again, dance with the devil doesn't change, the devil changes you. Like in my mind, be careful.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Like I said, I feel an obligation to speak up like we have to, but you got to play the fine line. I understand some people too, the families to feed, they might get fired. And so it's not, that's why I don't like call people cowards and stuff, but it's just like, but you also have an obligation to speak truth too.
Absolutely,
so it gets,
to the greatest degree you can.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, thanks so much for any final thoughts to add before we wrap up? Or?
Man, honestly, there's just so much that we would have to cover.
For hours,
yeah, exactly. So basically, I just want to say thank you, Jake. Like honestly, man, just having a conversation about really this specifically, and also OKC, because what it represents and what it kind of like embodies. Again, it's just like it's the perfect example of what your government is capable of. And if we're unwilling to acknowledge that fact, we're on a fast track, and it
doesn't take long to complete.
Yeah,
I've looked at. I might have to flee the country at some point. You have to be realistic with those situations.
Be careful, man. And like honestly,
speaking up, I'm definitely on their list.
You're a priority target right now,
and I have to be realistic that I am on these lists.
Yeah, man. And you know what happens is that you're willing to speak the truth no matter the consequence. That was my very first episode. I said this. Like legitimately, and it was about MK Ultra. It was about, essentially trauma-based mind control. But in reality, it was just like we need to be willing, to at least bridge that gap and acknowledge that fact. And until we are willing to do so, then we're on this inevitable path
it's slowly, not that slowly, it's going further and further, and it can go like that when you're gone. People think, things are fine, but look throughout history, the communist revolution, these things happen, and they happen quick, and millions and millions of people die. Yeah.
And so what will the ultimate consequence become? I mean, what are we willing to allow it to become? And at that point, it's like, I don't know. We're trying to kind of grapple with what role we have to play in this situation, but yeah, anyway.
No, it's like, I feel like I felt an obligation to speak up. But like I said, it is complex. People, they can get fired for things they say. They can do this. That's how they can control you. Oh, we're going to get you fired. We're going to take your money away. We're going to shut down your bank accounts like they did in Canada.
Oh, my God. Which, the trucker protests.
Throw you in jail because you were fed up like January 6th.
Exactly, man. Yeah. And again, it's because you present the true ultimate threat to the permanent establishment that I mentioned before, that Edith Kermit Roosevelt had mentioned as well, which is just no matter who you're allowed to vote for, the path remains the same.
That's why I don't get caught up in the left-right pair.
That's what I mean, man. Yeah.
Hey, man, thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. This is a blast.
Jake, thank you, brother.
I love it.
Cool. Yeah.